Mitt Romney's Ohio bounce, and Joe Biden tries to help the Democrats bounce back.
From the Battelle studio at WOSU at COSI, this is Columbus on the Record. Joining Mike Thompson this week, Joe Hallett, senior editor for the Columbus Dispatch. Karen Kassler, State House Bureau Chief for Ohio Public Radio and TV. Sam Gresham of Common Cause Ohio, and Michael Miller, attorney and former Franklin County prosecutor.
The optimist in the Romney campaign might say the Republican is closing the gap on President Obama in Ohio. The pessimist might say Romney's campaign has just stopped the bleeding. In the days before the debate, Romney was trailing President Obama in Ohio by an average of 9 points. After the debate, he trails by an average of 5 points. So basically, Romney has cut the president's lead in half. So it was left to Joe Biden, and to use the baseball metaphor, to try to even the best of 4 debate series. What we saw was much different than last week's debate. Take this exchange on tax cuts.
The only way you can find $5 trillion in loopholes is cut the mortgage deduction for middle-class people, cut the health care deduction for middle-class people, take away their ability to get a tax break to send their kids to college. That's why they arrive.
Is he wrong about that?
He is wrong about that. You can cut tax rates by 20% and still preserve these important preferences for middle-class taxpayers.
Not mathematically possible.
It is mathematically possible. It's been done before. It's precisely what we're proposing.
It has never been done before.
It's been done a couple of times, actually.
It has never been
Jack
done
Kennedy
before.
lowered tax rates, increased growth. Ronald Reagan.
Now you're Jack Kennedy.
Ronald Reagan.
It went on like that for most of the rest of the debate. Karen Kassler, did Joe Biden right the ship for the Democrats, do you think, with his performance last night? It's tough to pick a winner, but did he do well enough to put the game back in the Democrats' hands?
I think a lot of Democrats are feeling very confident in his performance and very happy about what they saw out of him. And he certainly hit a lot of the points that people were critical of President Obama for not hitting in the previous debate, things like the 47% comment and some of the remarks about flip-flopping and changing positions. And so there was that. But, you know, Paul Ryan certainly held his own, and a lot of Republicans are very pleased with his performance, especially against a veteran like Joe Biden. So I think the vice presidential debate is really, out of all the debates, the most fun to watch, because typically people don't vote on the vice president, they vote on the president. And so these candidates typically have less to lose, and they may be a little bit less restrained, so to speak.
Even for Joe Biden.
One of the things that amazed me in the 2 polls, though, that was the CBS poll and the CNN poll. And the CNN poll said Ryan won, and the CBS poll said that Biden won. I thought it was an interesting debate from that standpoint. Now, something I saw that I thought was the split screen again showed itself, and I think both handled it better. So when the off shot was occurring, you didn't look bad writing notes. I think all in all, it was as what was expected. I thought it would be a draw. I really did think it would be a draw, but they won. They gave it to Biden, and I think there's some reasons for that.
They both accomplished what they needed to accomplish. I think Biden stanched the bleeding from the Obama debacle in his debate, and I think Ryan showed that he belonged on the stage. I think on debating points, Biden would have been the clear winner if Joe Biden hadn't been Joe Biden. He came off as smug and condescending and interrupting. I think he lost on style points, and I think that makes a difference.
Now, how do you, because Obama was criticized, President Obama was criticized for not doing that, but Joe Biden now is criticized for doing that. Michael, how do you win?
Well, I don't think you do, but there's a way to do these things and a way not to do these things. And as Joe says, if you come across smug and condescending, even if your points are the same, that's not going to win for you. I don't know that there are winners or losers in these things. Karen says the Democrats were happy. I'm sure they were. But I think one of the reasons they're really happy is that Biden didn't pull, one of his many misstatements that embarrassed everybody. He got through it okay, did fine. And again, as Karen says, and I totally agree, I think people enjoyed it, but they don't vote on the vice president debates. That's how the presidential debates go that matters.
I'm very curious. Both of you said this, that Biden interrupted. From an adjective standpoint, how would you describe what Romney did the first day today? Was that anything close to what Joe did?
Well, I was quoting Joe on that, Sam, because I didn't watch either one of them. And I haven't watched one in 14 or 15 years. And don't intend to.
No, I didn't think it was even close, Sam. I thought that Joe Biden cut in on Ryan much more than Romney did on Obama, and I thought the moderator, although she was much better than the presidential debate, she let it happen too much. Each candidate was supposed to have 2 minutes to say their piece. I think Biden's strongest moments were at the end when he talked about women's issues, and he was very good on those. And I thought that, oddly enough, that Ryan's strongest moments were when he talked about Medicaid and Social Security. You can criticize their plan for all you want, but at least they have a plan, and we have not heard anything from Biden and Obama on how they're going to preserve Medicare.
Who watches the vice presidential debate?
Walks.
My guess is it's the partisans, the real wonky, people really in tune.
That's it.
I think with this debate, though, with the personalities involved, I think there were other people that might have been engaged beyond just people who are wonks. I think people were watching to see Joe Biden make a gaffe, to see Paul Ryan because he's cute, whatever. And I think that it might have drawn a different crowd this time than the usual people who are watching.
Don't forget there were 2 baseball games, or 1 baseball game and an NFL game on last night.
But the Ohio teams are all out. Come on.
Tonight, in my house, when we watched the president versus Governor Romney, everybody in my house thought he was a bully, and they thought he was disrespectful, and that he manipulated the moderator. He was disrespectful to the moderator.
I want to get to why people don't watch debates. Michael, why haven't you watched them?
Well, just a little thing you put on there. I mean, how many times has Joe Biden yelled middle class, middle class, middle class, middle class? Ask any question. What's going on in Afghanistan? We're fighting for the middle class. Obviously, that polls well. And that's what they do. Both sides do it over and over and over again. And I just got fed up 14 or 15 years ago. This isn't a debate. These are 2 spin doctors, saying what they want to say. They're geared to do it. And I found them basically worthless. So I just quit watching them.
You know, I had the opportunity to sit in on a focus group here in Columbus last week, and it is impossible to overstate the damage that was done to Obama in that first debate. To a person, they were shocked at how poorly he did. One woman even said he was irresponsible for not being prepared. And all of them said it made them look at Mitt Romney with different eyes. So these things really do matter. I thought the 47% comment was ruinous to the Romney candidacy. But amazingly, this debate just turned the momentum around.
It's hard to believe.
All right, let's get back to the campaign. Away from the debate stage, the candidates were back in Central Ohio this past week. President Obama led a rally of 15,000 supporters on the OSU Oval. It was a Get Out the Vote rally on voter registration deadline day. The night before this appearance at Ohio State, he tried to put that debate performance into perspective.
After the debate, I had a bunch of folks come to me, don't be so polite, don't be so nice. But I want everybody to understand something. What was being presented wasn't leadership, that's salesmanship. Governor Romney's plan is to let Wall Street run wild again, but he's going to bring the hammer down on Sesame Street.
Mitt Romney was having none of that, trying to maintain his momentum at a rally in Mount Vernon.
My whole passion is about helping the American people who are struggling right now. That's what this is about. The president says he's for the middle class. How have they done under his presidency? Not so well. I want to help the middle class get good jobs and better take-home pay. I know how to do that.
Sam Gresham, was this a missed opportunity for the president in that debate, and can he recover from it, and has he already recovered from it?
In my opinion, it was a missed opportunity. What he was looking for was a break-even. I don't think he went in there with an idea of winning, because what happens, 5 of the last 6 incumbents have lost in their first presidential debate, but they've all gone on to win the election. I don't think that's what he was trying to do. I don't think he was well prepared, and I think the structure of how Governor Romney approached it caught him off guard. From a resolve, I don't think he has to change much, and particularly here in Ohio. Everybody knew the election was going to get close. Who think that President Barack Obama was going to win by 9 points. No way. He's going to do what he did last time. He needs to maintain what he is doing. The job figures really help, and the next job figures will really help the day before election.
If you look at the poll numbers, the fundamentals in the race really haven't changed.
No.
Barack Obama is at roughly 51, 52%. What's happened is the few undecideds have gone to Mitt Romney after that debate. So it's tightened up from 9 to 5. But there's still a 20-point gap for women in favor of the president, 12-point gap in favor of Mitt Romney with men. Is it the undecideds that are swaying towards Romney because of this debate? What do you think, Michael?
Well, I think so. Will they sway enough? Who knows? It's still, I think we have, 25 days till the election? That's still a long time. As I remember, and perhaps I'm wrong, but President Carter had a pretty good lead on President Reagan before Governor Reagan at the time, and he ended up winning, 44 or 45, something like that.
I think the last few days after the debates, those numbers came much, much closer.
Well, I think that's true. But there's a long time left here, and I think most people have decided, and I do think some people will change their mind after the debates, but not a lot.
This focus group, Joe, were they undecided voters or were they partisans?
They were. There were 12 of them. They were well chosen. It was conducted by the Annenberg School, Peter Hart, and they were mostly moderate group. They were persuadables. That I think 5 went in for Obama, 4 for Romney, and the others were undecided. And it was fascinating to watch, but it was very clear that the debate really hurt Obama. But the other thing that I took out of it was these people don't like Mitt Romney. They personally do not like Mitt Romney.
So did his favorability rating go up after that first debate?
I think so. But because they don't like him does not mean they won't vote for him. Because on the key question of who's better prepared to handle the economy, almost all of them favored Mitt Romney.
And you heard Mike mention this whole idea of people being decided and not going to change their mind. That's what both campaigns are looking for. Those are the voters that they want to mail their ballots in and get them to the polls. And the ground game is really crucial when you have so few undecided voters and people have made up their minds. Once you cast that ballot, it's over.
Yeah.
You know?
It's getting them out early.
And Karen makes a very good point. The ground game. There are 121 offices that Obama has in Ohio. They've had more than that number since July. So they are mobilizing people. And in the final essence, that's what's going to make the difference. 2 things for him going into the next debate. The power of the incumbency. He has to find out in his head how best to use that. The third thing that he has, the second thing that he has to worry about, and specifically from the African American community, the angry black man. People are concerned how that will be viewed if he takes on Romney's style, if people will accept that from a black man in a white audience. So there are lots of subtleties. I think that was one of the things that hampered him, was that image of the angry black man. And as the format was being lost, he didn't want to pivot to that type of person, so he didn't do it.
Okay, let's get to our next topic. Ohio's battle over in-person early voting is going to the U.S. Supreme Court. Secretary of State John Husted is appealing last week's court ruling ordering Ohio to allow in-person voting the last 3 days before the election. The 3-0 appeals court ruling said the state had no reason to allow military personnel to vote in person while denying non-military personnel that opportunity. Husted calls it an unprecedented intrusion into a state's ability to run an election. Joe Hallett, why is John Husted keeping up this fight?
Well, I think he's got a good case to make. He said that this decision from the Sixth Circuit does not make legal or practical sense, and I think he's got a valid case. Because on the one hand, the Sixth Circuit says you cannot discriminate against a group of voters. You cannot not allow military folks to vote on the weekend before the election and not other voters. On the other hand, the court said, but you can leave it up to each county whether or not they decide to have weekend voting. So, in other words, the court says, but the counties can discriminate against groups of voters. So I think it's a very confused decision. And I think going forward, what we're going to see, and what Husted already is doing, is he's in advance of the appeal, whether the Supreme Court accepts the appeal or not, he's preparing the boards of elections. I think next week he will say, okay, if my appeal is denied, we are going to allow voting on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, these hours across the board.
Well, that's the uniformity. Do you think he will say all counties have to do it, all small rural counties, as well as the urban counties, which have done it in the past, and did it in 2008? Will he say all counties have to do it?
Yes, absolutely. I think he's said that from day one. He wants uniform rules across the board.
So, Karen, who pays for that?
Guess. Yeah, but there's still the argument from those who are upset by this whole thing is even with uniformity, that everybody has the same rules, it's still not uniform because the counties are very different. Cuyahoga County is very different than Vinton County, and so it's
Can't take a bus to the polling location in Vinton County.
Yeah, but it's the idea that just because you put the same rules in for everybody, it doesn't necessarily make it fair for every single voter in Ohio. And that's the real issue, is there's so many different parts of the state, so many different areas, and the rules, if the counties can enforce their own rules, they can maybe reach their own voters, but then you don't have the uniformity.
I think the Democrats have already won on this one. They win legally. Obviously, the Obama campaign and the Democrats have won legally so far, including the Sixth Circuit, but they have won the emotional battle because they have painted the Republicans in Houston as attempting to suppress the vote.
So that goes back to my other question, Michael. So why keep the fight up? Because it only prolongs, especially if you lose at the Supreme Court, if they just deny even taking the case, you're just delaying the inevitable and keeping that fire burning.
Well, I don't know John Husted, but my thought is that he's doing this one of two reasons, or perhaps both. He's carrying the party banner, so to speak, and doing what the Republicans wish, or he truly believes that it was a very poor decision out of the Sixth Circuit. It's wrong, and he thinks the Supreme Court will reverse it.
The sad part of that, though, is the confusion that still exists. And what Joe said, the perception of voter suppression in the Ohio Republican Party.
Well, Sam, that's the Democrats painted that picture. There may not be a dime's worth of truth to it.
But there is a dime's worth of truth, and there's sufficient evidence to prove that this could have the effect of suppressing, and will have. I mean,
Sam, I've been voting 60 years or 55 years. I've never seen a problem with anybody voting. Well, now, there may be a guy here and a guy here.
There may be a ghost in the room, but 41 states put this legislation forth, and it could have the effect of negating 2 to 6 million people. So the possibility that it may have some credence is there.
Well, there's a possibility I might win the lottery back-to-back times, too, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, but from my side of the street, I don't see it the same way you do.
Yeah,
I think it has promising possibilities.
Speaking of winning the lottery, the Columbus Casino has been a popular spot this week after its opening on Monday. Looking at the opening ceremony, it was hard to imagine, so long ago, that time when the mayor and many civic and business leaders wanted nothing to do with the casino. But the gamblers, or even just the curious, seem to enjoy it. Casino officials say 25,000 people visited the casino on its first day, an impressive start even for actress Anne Margaret.
Anne Margaret, want to welcome you to Columbus. You know, one of her great movies was Viva Las Vegas. Well, now I want to tell you, Viva Columbus!
Viva or not, gambling revenues across the state are down for the third straight month since the Cleveland and Toledo casinos opened last summer. Casino revenues across the state are down 20%. Karen Kassler, you were there at the opening. What were your impressions?
Well, I liked Buster Douglas's speech, which was basically... It was great. He didn't say a word, tipped his hat, there we go. And, after an hour and a half of sitting in the casino, which is garish and gaudy, but it's gorgeous, I wanted to get out and walk around a little bit. I think the crowds at the Columbus Casino, according to the estimates, were larger than the ones at the Cleveland Casino and the Toledo Casino. But you do have to wonder about market saturation. And I asked the COO of Penn National, who was there, what is going on with this? You've got another casino still coming in Cincinnati in 2013, and you've got the racinos that are coming online in 2014. When do we get to this point where there is too much? He doesn't feel we're at that point, and the numbers certainly suggest that there might be some of that coming. And you have to look too at online gambling. At some point, that's going to possibly become legal. Once people can gamble in their basement in their underwear and not have to leave the house, what's that going to leave for casinos and racinos?
Michael Miller, the 20% drop, is that because the newness of the Cleveland casino and the Toledo casino is wearing off, or is that a trend, do you think, that will continue?
Well, I think it's the former, Mike. I don't know, but I think whenever you have something so new, I mean, we've just never had this. Anybody wanted to gamble legitimately anyway, you know, you go to Atlantic City or fly out to Las Vegas or something.
Not legitimately.
And now you have it right here, as they did in Toledo and so forth. And I think there's a great influx to go in, but it'll come down. Now, I think the test is, let's look a year from now or 18 months from now and see. But this, I think, is pretty normal.
The West Side, they're hoping?
I think they're hoping, but to go to Karen's question, the research says this. It does not have a negative effect on tables. But if you have a preponderance of more machines, it does have a negative effect. Now, in this formula, what does racinos mean? Because racinos are just machines.
Right.
So I don't know. You know, in business school, they taught me there's a thing called point of diminishing returns. All of a sudden, 2 years ago, we had nothing. Today, we have a glutton of things. I will see. I think there is a leveling off that's occurred. One other thing I want to say to research, in isolation, casinos do better. Like in Indiana, it's only one or one state. But when you have multiple, it's questionable whether they will not have a negative effect on each other.
What do you make of the mayor getting up there and Viva Columbus? And they didn't really, the mayor was kind of ambivalent, but other officials, they didn't want it here, and here it is.
Well, yeah, he was not exactly doing cheerleading jumps when it was first proposed.
For the Arena District, yeah.
Yeah. But it's here. He's accepted it. The city's getting good reviews. We had a beautiful story in Time magazine last week about how well Columbus is doing. I think it will help the West Side. I mean, it's bound to be helped. You know, the question, because there's going to be thousands of more people heading that way. But the question is, will they leave the casino and those really nice restaurants and all that stuff to go shop anywhere else?
One last topic tonight. We'll give it a short shrift, but we'll come back to it at some point. Fewer Ohio ex-cons are returning to prison. Ohio's 3-year recidivism rate has seen a steep decline. That's the rate that measures the number of convicts who get in trouble and return to jail within 3 years. The rate of returning convicts has fallen 20% over the past 10 years. Michael Miller, you're a defense attorney, you also served as a prosecutor. Why do you think fewer folks are going back to prison?
Economics, I think, is the main reason. I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors in this. It's apples and oranges. We're comparing things in 2003 to 2012. They're not the same base. It's different. We've got first offenders now committed to certain offenses. The judges cannot send them to prison. I think many of the judges see convicted felons doing these same things and think, well, I can't send A, I'm not going to send B. People who get out of prison with this post-release control they have, it's mandated for homicides and I think felonies 1 and 2. But the majority of the crimes are felonies 3, 4, and 5. They are under post-conviction release.
So there's a lot more community
sentencing
and things like that going on rather than...
There's all of that stuff, and I think it still boils down to the bottom line of economics. I don't think we're going to see a great deal of crime going down at all. I don't think this is some panacea that we can all grab onto and say we're going to be much safer in the future. I just think it's frankly smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, but the one thing that puzzled me about it, the national average is 40% of recidivism. In Ohio, we're down to 34%. I think there's some structural changes that we've put into place. We have better community supports. We have more people being referred to the community for rehabilitation, treatment, whatever you want to say. I also think, and I don't know if the momentum came from Strickland and Kasich continue with, I think the corrections department has begun to focus on local community activities rather than locking people up.
I'll have to leave it there. Time for Off the Record parting shots. And Michael Miller, we'll start with you.
Well, parting shot is I think that we're going to see a very close race of the president's race. Also for the United States Senate control of it, it's going to come down, I think, to a matter of a percent or so, one way or the other. It's going to be extremely exciting, but I think all of us will be very happy when it's over.
Sam?
I think in the long run, the race will tighten up. I'm not going to make a projection on who's going to win, but I think it's a typical race that we should expect. I question long-term the viability of the Republican Party, given what they've done in this election.
Karen?
We've had the presidential debate, the first one, the vice presidential debate. Now we start our debates here in Ohio. U.S. Senate debate coming up on Monday, the first of 3 at the City Club of Cleveland. I get to moderate that one. That should be very interesting. We also have congressional debates. There was a good one in Northeast Ohio. Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur and Joe the Plumber, Sam Wurzelbacher. He didn't show up, so there was an empty chair. So that was kind of interesting. And also the most expensive House race in the United States right now, Betty Sutton and Jim Renacci, and they debated this week.
Joe Hallett.
I had a couple of calls from some national folks about 2 weeks ago about, is Mitt Romney pulling out of Ohio? And I had to laugh at that. But if you look at the money they're sinking into the state, the candidates are all over. Romney Ryan will have been here 5 of the last 6 days by this weekend. Obama is coming to Athens next week. Michelle in Delaware County. They're all in here, and they're going to stay all in until Election Day.
My off-the-record comment, we have 4 rules on Columbus on the Record for our panelists. Turn off your cell phones, look at the camera when they call your name, and you won't forget your final thought. And you must act interested when other people are talking. Not be interested, just act it. President Obama violated that rule in the first debate. My prediction is he will not in his second debate. That's Columbus on the Record for this week. My thanks to the panel and our crew. I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.